I'm Summer Lee, soon-to-be first Black woman legislator from Western Pennsylvania and part of this progressive blue wave.
I'm Bob Bland, entrepreneur, co-founder and co-organizer of the 5 Million Strong Women's March on Washington, and a leader of this year's Progressive Revolution.
I'm Matt McDermott, Democratic pollster and number cruncher for the New Progressive Left.
And I'm Tucker Carlson's worst enemy, Tamika Mallory, organizer of the Women's March on Washington and a foot soldier in the Not My President Club. Welcome to Manhattan Neighborhood Networks and Free Speech TV's America's Midterms, the Blue Wave. On tonight's show, From Brooklyn with Love, a progressive New Yorker with a passionate message for all of us, legislative candidate Zellnor Myrie. Also, with a platform so strong there is no way he can lose, Anthony Flaccavento, a future Virginia congressman with the right moves and the right words. He's rubbing his Republican opponent the wrong way. So buckle up, get your boards ready, surfers, because the Blue Wave is coming up next. Welcome. We begin with some reflection on the tragedy at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. While Trump may not have pulled the trigger, he certainly aided and abetted and fostered a climate of hate that resulted in the death of innocent Americans. Let me be clear. What happens to my Jewish brothers and sisters happens to all of us. This is what being a true progressive and an American should stand for. So Trump, if you're watching, I'll get in trouble if I say the things that I really want to say to you today. Summer, I'm going to turn to you. I mean, you're from this area. Your district is bordering right there where this terrible incident has happened. Tell us how people are feeling. How are you feeling? And what is it like in your community at this time?
It's a very hard time right now. You know, this heart of our city is one of the most diverse areas. I mean, these folk, they took me in as family throughout my campaign. The people who worship there, the people who live there, those are my constituents, those are my family. So it is hard. But as my button says, you know, we are stronger than hate. And, you know, in this time right now in our country, we all have to be stronger than hate. We all have to be stronger than this rhetoric. We all have to come together, and I think that's what we're seeing in Pittsburgh right now. You know, one of the chants at the vigil that we went to was vote. It was vote, and the people in Pittsburgh are knowing that we need to look forward. We need to activate. We need to get together and do what we can do. And there is something we can do immediately. On November 6th, we can turn out. We can still organize. We took a day off from canvassing. The next day, we got back on it.
That's right. You know, Trump likes to talk about the angry mob, but look at what he has produced in this country. I mean, do you feel like really the blood is on his hands in this situation?
Absolutely, and we don't want him in Pittsburgh. We saw, you know, immediately he blamed the victims. He said that if those people had only had an armed guard in their house of worship, that it's supposed to be a place that's welcoming. It's supposed to be a place that's welcoming and accepting of folk. To even have armed guards would just be antithetical to what a house of worship says. So to blame them was disgusting. It was right in line with what he always does. And when he said that he wants to come to Pittsburgh, I feel like I can speak for my community. I can speak for my city. We don't need him in Pittsburgh. We don't need hate in Pittsburgh, and we will not give hate refuge. Not in our city.
Summer, I think you said it so eloquently. This country is under attack right now by white supremacists, and we have a president of the United States, the Republican Party, that has not only actively denied its existence, but has empowered those people. And our only response as Americans can be to come out and vote. We have to take power into our own hands, and we have to make a change in this country right now.
Right, we can't reward him or the Republicans who have supported him for this behavior. And, you know, by golly, he stands up and says he is a nationalist, a white man, declaring nationalism. It is extremely dangerous, and I think that there is no way we can ignore what is happening and who is actually sort of, you know, the head white supremacist in charge. I said that. I mean that. That's the way that I feel.
And he accepts that.
You know,
he seemingly accepts that. He accepts that characterization.
It's clear.
And it's one of many. There was 3 different acts of hate this week alone, and they were all directly from people who were on forums or had vans covered in Trump and Pence memorabilia. And then he went on to just do rally after rally after rally.
He didn't even pause.
He didn't even pause to honor the dead or to even give their families any solace. I think this election must be a referendum on whether we want to go towards hate.
We know exactly what we get with him. We know what we get. We know what our task is. We're never going to get more from him.
That's
and it's almost like no one's talking about the 2 black folks who were killed.
And that's what I wanted to mention, because it's a double hit. It's a double hit.
Yes, that's
so,
right.
you know, my community was hit. My specific community was hit. But also black folk who were down in Kentucky were murdered by a white supremacist who tried to get into a black church.
That's right.
So what that really says is, who is safe in Trump's America? Who's safe here? None of us.
Well, I mean,
not
certainly I know
progressives.
that our Jewish brothers and sisters don't feel safe. And I mean, how do you all feel about that right now?
Yeah, I mean, and I think, Summer, your point is exactly right. It's just the multitude of communities that are affected and impacted and threatened by this president. I mean, 48 hours after these attacks took place, he took to the national stage and said that Democrats and journalists were the enemy of the people. That is not acceptable language, and we as voters have the power in a few days to change that. So I hate to make this a referendum, but it has to be. And you can't just go vote, as we have one weekend left, this Saturday and this Sunday, to make sure that every single person you know is not only voting, but knows the implications of that vote.
Speaking of that, what's the state of the races, Matt? Like, what's happening out here?
Yeah, I said it last week, I'll say it again this week. I hate to sugarcoat these things. We have a lot of races in this country that are way too close for comfort. Typically, in a midterm like this, you'd see in the final week or two, races start to break towards the minority party. That hasn't happened this year. So we have right now 7, if not 8 Senate seats that'll all come down to a few thousand votes. So if you're in Arizona, Nevada, North Dakota, Missouri, West Virginia, Florida, Tennessee, Texas, all of those will come down to a few thousand votes, and it cannot be stressed that the stakes couldn't be higher.
You can always do phone banking. You can do it remotely, straight from your home for a local race, or you can just canvass locally in your neighborhood, and it really does make a difference.
And just texting friends and family, too.
Go get your cousins.
Get your people. One just actionable step where you can help voters make a plan. Making a plan increases the likelihood that someone will actually go and vote. So know what time your polls open and close in your state. Know how you're going to get to the polls. Are you going before work? Are you going after work? Making those plans just is so much better, and it helps other people. It's exactly what we need right now.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your leadership, and we wish you well in your community. Anything that we can do, you do. Not only do you have a race, but you also have a commitment to your people. And I think that's just so important. Thank you so much. Coming up next, he's bold, he's focused, and straight out of Brooklyn, a candidate that really rocks.
My name is Zellnor Myrie, and I'm running to represent the 20th District in the New York State Senate. I can't do it without you, and hope that I can get your vote.
This New York borough is hip, cool, and almost totally progressive. And so is our first guest, running for the New York legislature, model candidate Zellnor Myrie, the son of immigrants, a guy standing up for what's right, and a progressive. Zellnor, welcome to America's Midterms. Before we talk about your race, let's go to Pittsburgh and just talk about how you feel about what's happened there and how much of this can be placed at the feet of Trump.
You know, what we saw in Pittsburgh was an unspeakable tragedy. Some folks might not know, but there are more Jews in Brooklyn than there is in any county in the entire United States. So it's a tragedy in which we felt very personally. And I, put responsibility on the rhetoric of this president, of the rhetoric that we've seen on the other side of the aisle, and what has really given face to racism and xenophobia that we've seen in this country for a long time.
Zellnor, I want to ask you, going back to New York, obviously you just won a primary a month or two ago. Why is it important, even if you live in a Democratic state, to be involved at the local level and to be looking at the candidates at a local level, and frankly coming out and vote next week at a local level?
Yeah, and to be clear, before you say that, Zellnor, you are my idol. Your win made you my idol.
Thank you very much. It's so important for us to be involved on the local level. A lot of folks don't know, but the everyday things that affect your life, the trash, the school, justice system, that's controlled by your local legislatures. And so the situation that we had here in New York was a situation in which we had more Democrats in our state Senate than Republicans, but Republicans controlled the state Senate because there were a group of Democrats who decided to give their votes to the Republicans. And that had a very, very hard impact on communities of color, on reproductive health, on climate change legislation, because the Republicans in this state were not about to move any progressive bills.
So Zellnor, we have a lot of folk who are looking at the IDC, looking at how blue dog Democrats vote. Who do we go for then? What is a progressive? Who should we be looking for? Who can we trust now? Democratic voters, voters of color, marginalized voters in New York or in the nation?
You know, my political philosophy has always been, how can we do the most good for the most vulnerable in our society? And that, to me, is what defines what a progressive is. This is about fighting for issues and fighting for people who haven't had a voice. And I know sometimes people like to say the voiceless, fighting for the voiceless, but I think that people are intentionally silenced. We have communities of color that have been intentionally silenced, and being a progressive is about fighting for the communities that have been intentionally silenced.
Assuming you get elected this year and assuming Democrats take back the Senate in New York, what are the pieces of legislation that you want to see happen in New York to make voting easier and more accessible?
People say that voting is the right that protects all other rights. It's been a travesty that here in New York, we've ranked at the bottom of the entire nation in our voting laws. So there are a couple of laws that I'd like to fight for in the next legislative session. I think we need automatic voter registration. I think we need early voting. I think that we need same-day registration. I'd also like to see us teaching civics in our high schools and in our middle schools, right? If you train people early in their lives to step into the civics arena, they will be voters for the rest of their lives. And so that's also something that I'll be pushing for.
That's great.
Zellnor, one question. So we're both state level legislative candidates. And as progressives, I know we hear often about we're too radical or maybe we're too left. What do you say to that?
You know, I think what we've seen all across the country is that Democrats have been running as unabashed progressives. You know, we have had a long history of Democrats running to the center, and what we've seen is the results in the 2016 election. We cannot satisfy ourselves with pleasing everyone. What we need to be doing is running to the left and saying, here are the issues that affect our communities directly. You know, I think a lot of times people like to frame progressive issues as radical notions, but I don't think it's radical to say that everyone deserves health care. I don't think it's radical to say that everyone should have a decent place to live. I don't think it's radical to say that everyone should be able to vote easily. And I don't think that it's radical to say that we need to be protecting a woman's right to choose. These are things that Democrats have been running on unabashedly all across the country, including in the local level, and people have been responsive to it.
So Zellnor, what are your predictions for next week? When you wake up on Wednesday, what do you think will have happened both locally and then at the national level?
Yes, sir.
I'm very confident that we are going to take back the New York State Senate. We have some excellent Democratic candidates, not just here in New York City, but out in Long Island, up in the Hudson Valley and further upstate. So I feel confident that we're going to regain the majority. I think we're going to take back Congress. New York is going to play a serious role in that. We have some excellent congressional candidates in Long Island and upstate. And so I think that we're going to be able to check what this president has done and to be able to start mitigating the damage that he has wrought all over the country.
Well, thank you so much, Zellnor. My hero, Zellnor Myrie. I appreciate you so much for coming on and being with us today. You've got some great talking points, and we believe that you're actually going to do the work. So get out there, and as I tell every candidate who comes on this show, knock on those doors.
That's right. Door to door wins the war. That's what they say. Thank you very much.
That's right, Zellnor. Thank you. That's right. Go bring it home. Next, I love this candidate. His bumper sticker says relentless. Virginia's progressive powerhouse, the Flaccavento.
The economy is not for Wall Street, and our politics is not for the donors and the lobbyists. They're both for us. Let's reclaim them together. Thank you.
Roosevelt, Kennedy, Obama now add a new name, Flaccavento, a true progressive fighter and now a congressional candidate in Virginia, a farmer and an entrepreneur. Congress today, President Flaccavento, maybe tomorrow. Please welcome the guy shaking up Virginia's 9th district, the Flack. Welcome.
Glad to be part of it.
Anthony, you've got that suitcase packed for Washington already, I've heard. We want to know more about what's happening in your area, so why don't you tell us about your race and some of the critical issues?
Sure, absolutely. So our area is the Appalachian part of southwestern Virginia, very similar in ways to Kentucky and West Virginia. And the big driving issue here is an economy that is definitely not revitalized. Trickle-down economics sure don't trickle down to places like southwestern Virginia. And so we've fought a campaign that's focused on real wealth building for ordinary people, farmers, small business owners, coal miners, factory workers, and it's resonated. We've done 100 town hall meetings across the district. Wow. People are coming out from across the spectrum, and looks like they're excited about a progressive person winning in an area that everybody else thinks is so red.
Anthony, I want to ask you a little bit in light of the events over the last week about some of this hate and anger we've been seeing on the national scale, and what's your message to voters over the next week about what we as Democrats are going to do differently if we take back Congress this year?
Right.
The real driver, I think, for Democrats, if we take back the House, it'll be great to have a blue wave, but to me, the real thing we need is a progressive wave of people who will actually work for working people, who will actually fight for local communities and real prosperity. Both parties have neglected places like Southwest Virginia and many other parts of the country, and I think that's at least where some of the anger comes from. Of course, it's been stoked and stoked by the right wing and the president just to an obscene level.
Anthony, speaking of the right wing, what type of race has your opponent been running?
My opponent is a member of the Freedom Caucus, and he himself is not a vitriolic person, but he is a party line guy who talks about the fact that what we really just need to do is fight for coal, fight to protect our guns, and fight not fight, but to allow this trickle-down economics to give it time to work. And it's not working. It's not going to.
Yeah.
Right.
So you've been, you've been really hands-on. You talk about the 100 town hall. You're talking to thousands of voters. How has this grassroots effort impacted your campaign? What is the feel of all these folk you're talking to?
Oh, it's amazing. It's a real give and take. The town halls, I speak for about 7 to 10 minutes, and the rest of the hour and a half or 2 hours is all about people talking to me, all about questions and comments. I have learned a ton.
Right.
From successful approaches to dealing with the opioid crisis that we face, to new ideas for businesses, to the needs of school teachers and mental health workers. I mean, it's been really a learning experience. It's been tremendous.
So what is item number one on that agenda? Is it repealing the tax cuts that passed a year ago? Is it health care? What is that number one priority?
Yeah, it's probably a threefold number one priority, if I can cheat a little. It really is a truly revitalized economy that actually works for people. Right up there with that is healthcare, and I talk a lot about a Medicare for all system, and it's very well received. And then the third thing is public education. Our schools are really hurting here. Those three together are the ones that come up virtually everywhere. And of course, in different places, you get other issues.
So Anthony, what's at stake here? This is a big midterm. What is at stake for the folk in your district?
I think it's two things. At the local level, it's just simple old-fashioned representation. They simply have not been getting good representation for the last 8 years. They've been neglected and ignored by the current congressman, and people want a working congressperson. That's number one. The second thing is really, unless we change our economic paradigm, unless we stop setting the environment against the economy, people against business, jobs against workers, which is what we've done for generations in Appalachia, unless we change that paradigm and go for a bottom-up economy, is what I talk about, that builds real prosperity, we're just screwed in Southwest Virginia without.
I love hearing you talk about how both sides, the Democrats and the Republicans, both need to get their acts together. That's really good, and I think you resonate well with people to stick to that talking point, to make sure folks are clear that this is not just about party lines, but it's about the people. And so what's at stake? If we win, what happens? I mean, obviously we know if we win, we win. But if we lose, what happens? And how do you, I get the sense that you're still going to be out there on the ground organizing people regardless of what happens in this election.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what I've been doing for the last 33 years, working on low-income housing, working with organized labor during strikes, working to build up opportunities for farmers and small businesses. This is my life. Yeah. Running for Congress is just another way of approaching that, trying to take that bottom-up, build it together approach to the federal level. Imagine if we can get a place like rural Southwest Virginia that went 69% for Trump to put in a progressive working person in Congress. It won't only be good for this region, it'll shake politics up.
Exactly. So what is the prediction for Wednesday morning? Next Wednesday.
How are we going to be feeling on Wednesday?
Next Wednesday.
Yeah.
Right, right. Well, I'll be slightly hungover either way. Say that.
Hopefully a good hungover.
What do you anticipate at the national level? What do you think our outcome's going to be next week?
Yeah, and let me also add on to that and specifically ask about the Senate race in Virginia.
Well, I think, I know Senator Tim Kaine pretty well. I've known him for a number of years, and he's the opposite of Corey Stewart. Number one, he's just an eminently decent human being. Yeah. Did social justice work in Latin America, was the mayor of Richmond, has gone up to become one of our 2 senators. He's a pragmatist like me. He gets stuff done, and he just is a person who exudes love. He's really the opposite of Corey Stewart, and I think he's going to beat the pants off Corey Stewart.
We hope
every reason to think that. I think nationally, I'm not much of a prognosticator. I feel confident in the Democrats taking the House. I'm not sure about the Senate.
I feel confident as well. We want to be celebrating with you. Thank you for being with us. Keep knocking on those doors. Don't stop. You're already on the ground, but stay out there. Don't get tired.
We won't.
All right. Thank you for being with us. Coming up, Matt does the numbers, gives us our predictions. We want to hear, Matt, what's going to happen on Tuesday. Plus, a toast to the candidates, or maybe just the first victory celebration. That's next. Welcome, everyone. This is the last show before the election. What's everyone's predictions? What's going to happen, Matt? These deep breaths are scaring me.
So this is the weekend that matters. Yeah, we have all been working so hard for months, for frankly 2 years now, coming to this moment, and this is it. We need to be all hands on deck over the next few days. We need to be getting out that vote. Yeah. Republicans are energized. Democrats are obviously energized too. We need to get out our voters across the country.
So these long lines in Georgia, who's standing on these lines? For Stacey Abrams? Not? Like, tell me what's happening.
Yeah, and it's definitely our voters. It's some of theirs as well. The frustrating thing to me about these lines is they shouldn't be happening. Voters should not be having trouble getting to the polls. It should be quick and it should be easy. And I get the frustration. We need to overcome that frustration and fix it with Democrats in office who can make some legislative changes. But these are policies that were put in place to make us less likely to go vote.
Absolutely.
It makes us feel like it's a burden to come out and vote. So not only do we think that we can't change anything, that we won't get the type of people we want, but also the lines are long. There's voter suppression, and it's so many things stacked against us that we have to fight through, and we just have to get there on Tuesday and turn out.
Yeah, because look, I mean, my first prediction, Democrats will absolutely have more votes in this election. Voters will vote for Democrats more than they will Republicans in this election. The frustration I think we feel is that that's not enough. Democrats need to come out and vote by a margin of 8 or 9 or 10 points for us to get the victories we want because the deck is stacked against us. So in the House, I think we'll win the House. I think we have the numbers that we need. The Senate is a challenge. We always knew it was a challenge. And we need to be getting out that vote in states across the country.
And you've been saying that, Bob, about the Senate.
Well, and I think what we're seeing is that, the Senate is just one part of the issue. There's a lot we can do with the House. In fact, there's a lot of rules that have been changed by the GOP when they were in control of the House for the last few years that we need to take full advantage of if and when we get the House. But it's also got to be about us building this strong bench of candidates across the nation at the local level, at the state level, that we can continue moving forward after this election. And we just need to make sure that voters know that this is a referendum, that this is absolutely a turning point for us. Do we go further towards fascism or do we go back towards recommitting to democracy?
Yeah, I mean, this is a turning point, and this is a reminder, as we've had far too many times over the last decade, that elections have consequences.
Yes,
and the election consequences in 2018 with the Democratic House are investigations and accountability into Trump administration actions that we haven't had. It's releasing Trump's tax returns that we should have had years ago. It's investigations into administration officials who have corrupted our government. It's investigations into Republican House members who have corrupted our government, Duncan Hunter and Chris Collins, who are both running for re-election. This election has huge consequences, and we need to remember those when we go out and vote on Tuesday.
Especially when you have the President of the United States not only declaring nationalism, which is a whole different conversation, but also talking about people wanting pastors and leaders of congregations and in places of worship to have weapons, to have guns. And how can you tell people that they should be packing when they go to church? I mean, this is ridiculous.
And declaring that every single one of us around the table and every member of the Democratic Party is an enemy of the people in America.
Absolutely.
That
That's what fascism looks like. That's what it looks like. That's what it sounds like.
So we talk about fascism, but what can we do?
So I think at the Senate level, let's start there. Because that, frankly, is the more difficult conversation to have. I think we have a lot of potential to re-elect Claire McCaskill in Missouri, potentially Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota, and we need to be working on those efforts. We also have the chance to elect some new women senators this year in Kirsten Sinema and in Nevada as well. So we have opportunities there, even in the face of headwinds. In the House, I think we have some incredible candidates. Sharice Davids in Kansas comes to mind. We have a lot down in Florida as well. Just women and
Lucy
men.
And Macbeth in Georgia.
Yes, Lucy Macbeth. And then, I mean, I think, you know, sort of further down the ballot, we have the chance this year to oust Republicans that have been the antithesis of Democratic policies for years. Scott Walker.
We got to come back to that. And this is good. You were getting into it.
But did you notice that he didn't mention any of the candidates that I mentioned specifically? Looking back,
he's making me feel a little nervous. He didn't say anything. But listen,
Andrew Gillum will be the next governor of Florida.
Our president.
That's a strong prediction. I believe that as well. So let's wrap it up here. We're going to get back to talking about this a little later because there's so much to share and such a little bit of time, just a little bit of time to make it happen. Most important weekend. There's no better way to end a great show than with a toast. We're wishing all the progressive and Democratic candidates across the country not just good luck, but good spirits. And you all remember, get out and vote because our democracy literally depends on it. Cheers, everyone.